Hello there. Welcome to Wake Up to the Bible. I'm Daniel Kaplan. I'm here with Dr. Mark Kaplan. Together, we are going through the books of the law, Genesis through Deuteronomy, over the course of this year, just little bits every single day. Today, we're going to be reading Genesis 14:21 through 15:6, and I will be reading from the Robert Alter translation. And the king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the folk and the substance take for yourself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I raise my hand in oath to the Lord, the most high God, possessor of heaven and earth, that I will take not a single thread or sandal strap of all that is yours, lest you say, I have made Abram rich. Nothing for me but what the lads have consumed. And as for the share of the men who came with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their share. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. And Abram said, O my master Lord, what can you give me when I am going to my end childless, and the steward of my household is Damasek Eliezer? And Abram said, Look, to me you have given no seed, and here a member of my household is to be my heir. And now the word of the Lord came to him, saying, This one will not be your heir, but he who issues from your loins will be your heir. And he took him outside and said, Look up to the heavens and count the stars, if you can count them. And he said, So shall be your seed. And he trusted in the Lord, and he reckoned it to his merit. So that's a quick little passage, but obviously incredibly important in terms of its prophetic significance. What are your first thoughts?
Well, I would like to go back to the Melchizedek passage. The Jews have a tradition that Shem was teaching people righteousness, and then Eber continued. They talk about the academy of Shem and Eber, and so that might somehow relate to the ministry of Melchizedek. I just wanted to mention that. Regarding Genesis 15, the sixth verse, of course, and I see in my Bible Romans 4:3, Galatians 3:6, James 2:23. It's a very important passage in terms of God's grace. That when you have that attitude, that faith in God, that commitment to God, then uh, that in effect establishes your relationship with Him. So it's a matter of His grace that he in effect takes you into his to a relationship with him, not based on you have so many pluses and minuses, but your attitude that you bring into the relationship, your faith.
Yeah, this kind of begins picking up where the whole other passage left off, and you have the situation where you have a victory, right? A militaristic victory, and yet Abram goes out of his way to say, well, we're not, none of the people associated are going to be getting any booty out of this situation. They're not going to be coming back with wealth, which is not the same thing that happens in Egypt when they leave with wealth and things like that. But it is interesting in this specific situation. He says, no, I'm not going to do it on the principle of the matter that that's not what this was about. This was not about amassing wealth for myself. What do you think about that? The fact that it's interesting because the Bible has both situations. It has situations where there's a military victory and there are rewards, and there's also military victory and it's the opposite. You're not really supposed to do anything. So it's just kind of interesting.
So Abraham gave a tithe to Melchizedek, but then he had the king here of Sodom. He said, "You can take the material items, but still, those who were with me, they need to get their share." So again, I say, "You shall not covet." Abraham was not a covetous person; he was a generous person, and evidently, also, he didn't want, I guess, people to think that he had done this for mercenary reason. He doesn't want people saying that the king saying, "I've made Abram rich." But it's interesting. He says that I have raised my hand to the eternal God Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth. So he echoes how Melchizedek had spoken, although Melchizedek did not use the personal name of God, Tetragrammaton, that Yahweh, that Abraham uses here. But again, we see one of the principles in one of the Ten Commandments is don't take the name of your God in vain. He says, "I've sworn in the name of God, and I'm going to keep my word." So again, it does tie in with, in my opinion, with the Decalogue.
All right, moving on to chapter 15, we have the after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram. Now, I've seen it commented, I believe Robert Alter talks about it, yeah, that this is generally how you hear about prophecies when you have the word of God coming to somebody in a vision, right? So this is a different situation than what it seems like we had before. Before it was a conversation, for lack of a better word, and now we have vision. So this actually moves Abram from from a person to a prophet. Some people who God works with, He does not deal with in the same sort of prophetic sense. But this is definitely a person who will. And this is where you get the more elegant analogy, if you will. Instead of dust of the earth, well, your descendants will be like the stars. Anything particularly about this section that comes to your mind?
Well, we may come back to it when we read in the epistles. We'll be reading Romans, the fourth chapter, and later on in Galatians and so on. Obviously, Abram's faith begins the relationship, but then he continues walking with God and obeying God as part of the relationship. So, as James says, faith and works.
Now, an interesting thing about this from a literary standpoint is this is clear, what they call clear stakes, right? We have the stakes of what's going to happen, because if God does not bless Abram with a child, we see where his inheritance is going to go, which in his mind is very unacceptable. It's not particularly given exactly the reason, except obviously for it to be a servant is just, culturally, I'm sure, very negative. You don't, it's certainly none of your genetic information is in that person or anything like that. So it almost feels like, you didn't have that value to continue your bloodline in the world. It had to go through somebody else. So those are stakes, and obviously the story is going to keep coming back to that. That is what is at the heart of Abram's concern, is that, and that again is what he's tested on. And to my dad's point about, wealth, this is another example. When we get to the tithing, when we get to not amassing wealth, we constantly see examples of Abram as a wealthy person, but knowing how to handle wealth well throughout the story. So again, that's not the concern of the story. It's not resources. It's a more personal matter for the character.
As we read through the Bible,
Sorry, just a second. Go
go
ahead.
ahead. As we read through the Bible, God says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." There, as we read through the Bible, we see that God, in effect, is building a family that He says. You see in 2 Corinthians 6:18 that our destiny is to be His sons and daughters, and you see a very strong focus on family here. Abram wants an heir, coming. He wants his family to inherit, not a servant.
Something else to keep in mind is obviously this is the second time he's told Abram this, but the first time it just didn't sink in for some reason, because he starts saying, "Well, fear not," and Abram's like, "Well, of course I should be afraid. I'm not gonna have a kid." He's not like, "Well, I'm not afraid, but what's going on? Where are we on a time schedule? Like, what is this gonna happen?" But no, he's not like, he's not impatient or anything. He literally is doubting that, right? He's like, "Look at the situation. Look what's gonna happen," when God already told him the whole dust thing, right? So apparently that didn't work. So so essentially, from a comedic sense, it's like, okay, the dust metaphor is not going to work. We're going to try the star metaphor. But apparently that one does work, because after he sees the stars, he's highly motivated to trust. So I'm somewhat jesting, but I think it does show that God does use different forms of communication. Apparently that conversation was not good enough. This beautiful vision apparently was. So he's going to reach you one way or the other, but let's try to make it easy on him if we can.
Well, some time had elapsed, and he's already getting quite old at this point.
Hmm.
And so you could understand why he was frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be too harsh on Abraham. I just think it just demonstrates the principle that sometimes, even when promised something, you got to hear it multiple times, and we're humans. That's just how it is. Any other thoughts on this section?
No.
All right. So if you're enjoying this podcast, please like, subscribe, hit the bell, tell your friends, and read ahead to upcoming portions if you want. Genesis through Deuteronomy. Leave a comment. You could leave a comment on any video. Don't need to be systematic about it because we'll catch it. We have little alerts, modern technology and all that. So we'll see it and we will address it if we are able. In the meantime, we will see you tomorrow.